This is Brent. Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com. Coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long. Back to our subject at hand, the laws of nature and the laws of nature's God. Well, 149, Catechism on the Constitution of the United States. Are there also other courts belonging to no particular state but to the United States only? And the answer is yes. Remember that in our country, we're different. We're different than every country in the world. We have two sets of sovereignties here within the same landmass. Unthought of, unheard of, uncontemplatable, all through European history. There always had to be one sovereign. How could you have a country if somebody wasn't in charge, see? I mean, really, that's our common law tradition. And even in our common law tradition in the old country in England, they fought over that. Because those that wanted to be logical, watch this, watch. Those that wanted to be logical couldn't tolerate it. Somebody's got to be in charge here. Well, that's logic. And when you discuss the concept we call sovereignty, there's no other way to do it. There has to be one sovereign. But in our common law tradition, there isn't. There are many. There are all the 50 state governments. They're all sovereign. That means they're final within their territorial jurisdiction. But then there is the general government in Washington, D.C., and it's final. But watch. It's final only within its limited jurisdiction, which is exclusive to itself. The states got together, the militiamen of the states, remember our Constitution, we the people, the militiamen of the United States, and it tells why they ratified this Constitution. Had a lady yesterday, she listens to us often on Roger's show. She said, Brent, she wanted logic, of course. But we want that. Doesn't always happen. Our common law tradition is, of all things, illogical. Oh, yeah. I'm not the first one to say it. People have been saying that for centuries. I read a book by Lloyd Paul Stryker, a great trial lawyer here in America back during the days of the McCarthy hearings. He made the point in his book called Trial Advocacy that our common law is not logical. Well, what did Justice Holmes say of the U.S. Supreme Court? He said, sometimes the law is an ass. That means it won't do what you want it to do. It won't look logical. It won't look pretty. It ain't just all right. That's right. That's right. I was looking up that phrase this morning. You know, it got popular the last 20 years or something. I don't know how long it's been, but people got to saying, they'd say something and they'd go, just say it. Just say it. Just say it. Well, what does that phrase mean? What does that mean? Just say it. Well, what that means is this, and I'm putting that in the footnote in the winterized translation of the Bible. It's kind of like, it's stronger, but it's kind of like, as it were. As it were. Just saying. What it does is that it attaches a fire escape on the end of the thing you just said, the assertion you just made. It attaches a fire escape so that the heat of the fire of what you just said, the uncomfortable feeling it gives people, they can jump on this fire escape and get away from it if they want to. It's an invitation. A fire escape and an invitation to, well, you may not like it, but just saying, it's a fact of the matter. See, that's the whole point about our common law. It's just the fact of the matter. We don't have to explain it. We don't want to. There's no need to explain something once it's been proven. And when it's beyond any reasonable doubt that is true, it's proven fact, move forward with it. What did Colonel David Crockett say? Davy Crockett. What did he say? He said, be sure you're right, then go ahead. Yeah. He didn't say make sure it all is logical. No. He just said make sure it's all right. It's all fact. It's all true. Once it's true. That ends it. A lot of things I can't explain. You've heard me say this before. Can't, but if I know it's a fact and it's proven beyond a reasonable doubt, by clear and compelling evidence, I'm moving forward. The sun comes up, the sun goes down, the world goes round and round. Has there ever been anybody that has explained that to everyone's satisfaction? Why they think it's that way? And the answer is no, 1,000 times. You ain't going to tell me. I've read all about it too. No. A lot of theories. Some of them pretty good. Some of them figure out on paper, and we can even navigate our airplanes by them sometimes. But just because something figures out on paper doesn't mean it's true. Let me give you an example. Left-wing wacko politics called communism, collectivism. I call it the law of the city instead of the law of the land. We used to say this back in the 50s, 60s. I'd hear the old people saying it back in the 50s. I heard them say it in the 60s. Then I started saying it in the 60s and 70s. Here it is. Communism works out on paper just right. Everything figures out just right. What's the problem with communism? It doesn't work. I don't care what the equations say. I don't care what the logic is. It doesn't work. Period. So all of life is that way. Oh, there's some things that are logical. A lot of things aren't. Our common law is, of all things, not logical in a lot of ways, many points. So we just say, well, just saying. There it is, just saying. Here's the trap door. If you don't like it, you can go somewhere else. But I'm not going to change my point of view just because you want to make it compatible to your puny little brain and your logic. Fact is fact. In the beginning, God created, God fashioned, God shaped and formed and fabricated. Fabrication is what a welder does. That's a bad sounding word, but he made the heavens, the skies, and the land and all that in them is. Now you explain that. We've been eating watermelons like gangbusters around here for the last couple of weeks. Boy, I inhale watermelons. I mean, the whole blasted thing if I get onto it. And there's no better watermelons in the world. This is just a fact. No logic to it, just a fact. There's no better watermelons in the world than the ones that grown on the high side on the sandy knobs along the Wabash River. I mean, I bought one yesterday like that. People everywhere selling watermelons. Huge. Thing's got thousands of seeds in it. Starts out like that. Little plant popping up about like that. And the thing just started growing. And then all of a sudden, that little flower comes on there. And then this little round thing starts peeping through. And then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Pretty soon, the blasted thing's that big. It's got thousands of seeds. They're all in rows. The watermelon's red. The seeds are brown. The outside is striped with green and light green and dark green. You explain how that happens. Well, you can explain some of it. You can explain about photosynthesis and how the leaves of the plant gather in the sunlight, and that creates photosynthesis. Nutrients go to you can do all that, but you still can't get to the bottom of how all this happens. How you can take that one puny little seed, put it in the ground, and get untold numbers. The vine never stops growing as long as the season allows it. It just keeps crawling all over the ground. Watermelons, muskmelons, honeydew melons. It's Main fair around here this time of year. but it's not at foundation, at bottom, not explainable. So we have these two sovereignties. We have 50 sovereign states, and everything within their jurisdiction, within their territorial jurisdiction, is under their sovereignty, except those very few things that the militiamen of the states have chosen to put into the Constitution of the United States and they said, we're giving this to the general government in Washington, D.C. That's not our baby. Admiralty law, exclusive jurisdiction of the general government in Washington, D.C. Patent law, exclusive jurisdiction of the federal government in Washington, D.C. And a few other things. Whatever the Constitution of the United States specifically lists. Interstate commerce, exclusive jurisdiction of the general government in Washington, D.C., and that means also the courts have jurisdiction to decide those cases. But very little. There are only four crimes our Constitution of the United States mentions, only four. Very limited criminal jurisdiction. Counterfeiting, piracy and felonies committed on the high seas, violations of international law, and last but not least, treason. Those four, that's it. Isn't it something? Now here's the problem, of course. Small jurisdiction, but there are around 6,000 federal crimes that Congress has passed that are federal crimes. That doesn't fit, does it? No, it doesn't. I mean, everything from deadbeat dads and a divorce to what kind of vegetables you can grow in your garden. The general government in Washington, D.C. has taken jurisdiction. That's part of our problem. Most of our tax money goes where? To the general government in Washington, D.C. And very little of it goes to who? The state government. It should be just the other way around. Because now the general government in Washington, D.C. has found that they can threaten the states and say, look, we're not going to give you any more money for your roads if you don't do what we say. We're not going to house any more federal prisoners in your county jails and pay the sheriff's department all that big money per prisoner if you don't do what we say. That is true. See, what the general government in Washington, D.C. is trying to do is destroy the sovereignty of the states. That's what they're trying to do. And how is it that they've been able to get away with that? I'll tell you how. When our country started, we were interested in our common law tradition. People really wanted to know. That's why we had that terrible war with Britain, because they were denying us trial by jury, the features of our common law tradition, separation of powers, all those kinds of things, and more to talk about. But they were denying those, so we separated. We went to battle over it, got the job done by the sovereignty of God. Then we said we want to set up our government in a common law way, and we've done that. All the features of our common law government we pretty much have here. Thank God we have them. But after that happened, up until the war between the northern and the southern tiers of the states, up until then, people did have an interest, and it was pretty good, pretty strong. After that, the left-wing wacko intelligentsia in the northeast part of our country that had a hand in fomenting that war and making it happen and slaughtering all those people, after that, we began to have more interaction with Europe. And the rottenness at the time and the rottenness of the solidarity of the powers that be and the domination of Rome, first the empire and then the church over Europe, and what that had done to them, we begin to have interaction. Then we begin to be enamored with the intellectualism of the German scholars and the assured results, they said, of scholarship, most of it coming out of Germany. Well, that began to fester and stink. And next thing you know, we had World War I, and the law of the city was key to that, by the way, in Germany. And Germany got Japan started, gave them their German form of the Code of Justinian of the Roman Empire. And they began to fester, began to think that then 6 organized crime families got the hold of the government of Japan and took their religion of Shintoism and added a whole lot of crazy wacko fantasy to it that had never existed before, and worked them up into a frenzy. And they said they could rape, pillage, and plunder other people. It didn't matter. Everybody else beside the Jap race were mongrel animals anyway. So let's go ahead and use them for our purposes. Then the Germans, they whipped them up into the same attitude. We're the master race, they said. Everybody else was trash. So we can rape them, kill them, whatever we want to do. You say, well, the Germans did some good things. Yes, they did. And it was because of the Christian tradition that was among them. But it got out of hand because those holding the levers of power and government under Hitler, especially, I don't think Hitler knew what was going on most of the time, but under him, they were wackos. So things got crazy. And we were sucked up into that beginning after that horrible war between our northern and southern tiers of the states. We got sucked into it. And then the bankers got their hooks and claws into us after that war. During that war was fomented in order to get the United States, one of the great reasons, get the United States to buckle and borrow money from the bankers, because they were funding both sides. They did. Same families. 2 branches of the Rothschild family funded both sides, the North and the South. They were making money like gangbusters. They tried to talk Lincoln into keeping up with it. He said, no, we're going to print greenbacks. They said, you do that. Well, I'm not borrowing any more money from you. We'll destroy you. That really happened. And then the bankers really got in gear. They say, we've got them now. They're into intellectualism. Their leading universities have abandoned Christianity. Harvard abandoned Christianity, turned Unitarian in 1811. After, pushing 200 years of existence, not quite, but it finally buckled. Yale did not buckle until almost 1900. And they buckled and threw off their Puritan ideals and their Puritan Christianity. Those were both Bible colleges. Princeton, she was infected, but she didn't buckle until the late 1920s, believe it or not. She was the last holdout. Things got worse from there. And this scholasticism and intellectualism and this worship of logic and the human mind, humanism, became front and center in America. And the bankers got what they wanted in 1913 with the Federal Reserve Bank. They could control the money. That means they could control people. People are desperate for money, always have been, always will be. Very dangerous. And it got worse from there. We're fighting a battle that is a matter of the spirit. And if we're not willing to, a critical mass of us is not willing to accept fact, even when we don't understand it, we will continue to be destroyed. Now, I understand a lot of things about facts that people say aren't logical. For example, just one example. Jesus Christ is both God and man. That's fact. How do I know? The evidence is overwhelming. The record is incontrovertible. Under all the rules of evidence we have, you can't deny the evidence. It's strong. But there are those that say, well, that's silly. That's a contradiction. That's not logical. He can't be a God and man at the same time. Well, I know you can't explain it. I can't either. And no one ever has. There have been a lot of people who have discussed it in length over the centuries, trying to determine how this can be true. They've never come to a conclusion that proves up logic perfectly. But I know what it isn't. I know that Jesus Christ, being God, fully the creator of all things, and man at the same time, is not a contradiction as a matter of logic. And of all the things that you don't understand, you don't like, it doesn't fit with your mind, you feel the heat and it makes you uncomfortable. If it's really true, it will never be it's not a contradiction. A contradiction, as a matter of our laws of logic that we've discovered through the centuries, is two facts. A contradiction is two facts that cannot be true at the same time and in the same relationship. And for all practical purposes, we just say two facts that cannot, are unable, impossible to be true at the same time. Well, that Jesus Christ is God and man, there's nothing in fact or logic that could say those two cannot be true at the same time. The Jehovah's Witnesses say that's a contradiction. They're wrong. It's not. Just something you don't like because it's not logical. We're going to be logical. We're not. We pay attention to logic, and we know how to think, and we know how to analyze things analytically. We're not dodos. No, you're a dodo. I don't care about your analytic ability. Fact is fact. Now, some of you that listen to me a lot have heard this a lot from me. I don't stop saying it. And I quote William Blackstone on that point. I quote Professor Merriman from Bolt Hall in Berkeley, at the old law school there, back before they went wacko. He said, where logic is stressed, fact has a way of receding from consideration. He wrote that in the context of the difference between our law of the land, our common law, and the law of the city. He was a comparative lawyer. That's what he focused on, is comparing those two traditions, the only two traditions of religion, law, and government fundamentally available to man, the law of the land and the law of the city. Well, Brent, are you saying our common law is religion? I'm saying our common law tradition is a Christian tradition. Yeah, it is. And the civil law tradition is an antichrist tradition. And every government that law produces is another antichristos, claiming the jurisdiction of God, the jurisdiction of Jesus the Christ on earth. That's what antichristos is. Well, let's get back to this court business. There are federal courts and there are state courts in America. Federal courts and state courts. The federal courts have to do with the matters arising under, key phrase, arising under our Constitution of the United States. If a question, a dispute arises under the Constitution of the United States, then the federal courts have jurisdiction. Every case you see the Supreme Court hears is a case that is a question about how to apply the Constitution of the United States. Every case is supposed to be. And if they don't have jurisdiction over it, because it is not a question about interpretation and application of the Constitution of the United States, the federal courts don't have jurisdiction to hear it. And they'll throw it out. And they do that a lot, by the way. More than people believe, but they do. Well, their jurisdiction, as I said before, is limited to what this document says they have. Jurisdiction they have, very limited. State courts of the 50 states of the United States are sovereign courts, and their jurisdiction, each one of the jurisdiction of the courts of your state, each one of the states, your state, my state, are courts of unlimited jurisdiction. That's something every lawyer has to learn just for the bar exam. You got to understand that in America, or he won't pass. State courts are courts of unlimited jurisdiction. They can hear any case about anything. General courts of the general government in Washington, D.C., their jurisdiction is limited by a very narrow scope of whatever the Constitution says jurisdiction they have. Well, can state courts hear cases about the Constitution of the United States? Yes, they can. They have unlimited jurisdiction. The only exception to that is the exception where the Constitution of the United States gives jurisdiction to the courts of the United States as opposed to the courts of your state. And there are a few areas they've done that. I mentioned them a while ago. Admiralty law is exclusive federal jurisdiction. State courts have no jurisdiction to hear admiralty cases. Bankruptcy courts are the exclusive jurisdiction of the general government of Washington, D.C. State courts and state government have no jurisdiction in our country to hear a bankruptcy case. Why? Well, because bankruptcy has to do with people having contracts across state lines, see? They said that. The Constitution says that. You go into a bankruptcy court, the one around you, it will be a federal judge appointed by the President of the United States and having passed muster with the advice and consent with an up or down vote of the Senate of the United States, every bankruptcy judge. That's why when you go into federal courts, what do you see? You see the admiralty flag. Why? 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 Because the Constitution of the United States gives that court, federal courts, admiralty jurisdiction if an admiralty case arises. That's a law of the city jurisdiction. The judge takes off his common law hat. He just finished maybe a jury trial for treason or something. Takes that common law hat on, puts on his civil law hat and say, okay, boys, get rid of the jury. This is admiralty jurisdiction. Let's get to it. Oh, you got a problem? You got a sailor on your ship who got caught with a sea bag full of cocaine. Is that the problem? Oh, that's a crime. That's federal crime. And federal law, violation of international law under the Constitution of the United States, I'll hear that case. And by the way, we want a jury. You don't get a jury. This is admiralty court. That's admiralty jurisdiction. I've been in federal courts. Some of you know me, you've listened to me. I've been tried in federal court for crime. The jury acquitted me of conspiracy against the United States. Bogus, but they did it. I had a jury, 12 men. And then that same court was trying other cases like admiralty. And I know the judges in that court are trying cases on admiralty where they didn't get the jury. That's not a common law court. That's a law of the city court. The law of the city is fundamentally a martial law, admiralty law, martial law to be applied to armies and soldiers on fields of battle, admiralty law to be applied on ships, to sailors, on the seas. They have that jurisdiction. Yeah. State courts don't. That's exclusive. The Constitution of the United States says so. And as long as that's kept within proper bounds, that's good. There are other courts belonging to no particular state but to the United States. Yes, we have the trial court down here. That's called the Federal District Court. Trial court. That's where the jury is impaneled. We call the trial courts in our common law tradition finders of fact. Finders of fact. That's their job. What's the fact of the case? Who done it? Why did he do it? Where did he do it? What did he do it with? How did he do it? Facts. The jury, fundamentally, impanel them. And we say to them, we want you to look back at the evidence and look back in time and tell us what happened. That's the fundamental job of the jury. And then we say to them, watch this. After you decide what happened, to your own satisfaction. Well, you don't really have to tell us, but you've decided. After you've decided, then we want you to take those facts or the law and apply it to those facts and tell us whether or not this fella is guilty or innocent. And you don't owe us any explanation about anything. That's your job, though. Go in the jury room. That's in there. We ain't bothering you. We don't need to know what you're doing, but find the facts and give us the verdict. That's the job of the jury. And the verdict is up or down, yes or no, in or out, black or white, guilty or innocent. Well, question 250. Are these courts, these state courts, equal? No, federal courts. Are these federal courts, question 250 of 333 questions, are they equal, or is one court superior to another court? Answer. They are not all equal. But in each state, some of the state courts, and we're talking about both apparently his, the state courts are set over others. And so it is with the courts of the United States. The trial court, the federal trial courts, are called finders of fact because that is an exclusive jurisdiction. No one else gets to decide what the facts of the case are except the jury. So we just call them that sometimes as a moniker. Well, they're fine. The finder of fact said this. That's the trial court. State courts, most of them, same way, have a trial court down here. That's where the case is tried. What if we get a verdict from the jury and somebody doesn't like the verdict? Well, they can appeal up to the state appellate court or the federal appellate court. And in both traditions, with the federal courts, there is trial court, federal appeals court, federal court of appeals, and then the Supreme Court of the United States, the final court of last resort in that jurisdiction. But then over here, state courts, most of them the same way. Trial court, where you have the jury, the finder of fact. They tell us what happened. Then, if you don't like that, somebody doesn't like that, some party to the case doesn't like the decision, they can appeal to the state appellate court. It's right here. If they don't get satisfaction there, they don't like the decision, the finding, they can appeal to the state Supreme Court. Well, that's true in most states. I've been in cases in some states, like Nevada. I don't know what it's like now. I just remember there was a trial court and then the Supreme Court of the state, nothing in between. Nothing. Just two levels of courts. You could appeal to the Supreme Court of the state. Maybe there's other states like that. Haven't heard of any. But every state's a little bit different, but fundamentally there are three levels of courts. Now, in the Israel that our Lord, Jesus the Christ, was born into, under the Bible, the Old Testament law, now this was something they did that was right. They had 5 levels of courts. And the lower level was the trial level where the jury of 12 was impaneled. Yes, the jury of 12. That's before the New Testament was written, the jury of 12. And because Greek was spoken throughout the Roman Empire at that time, they all spoke Greek, they called that court the bench of idiots. They used the Greek word for idios, or for idiot, which is idios. Idiot and idios, we don't have a translation of the word, we just use the Greek word, idiot, idios. It's taken on a negative connotation now that it didn't used to have. You know, in the Greek-speaking world, what it meant was, and you see this throughout the New Testament, the word is used. For example, Jesus Christ it says the Bible and the record says Jesus Christ took his disciples to a private place, a place alone. And the word idios is used, to an idios place, a place that is specific to them, special to them, nobody else there. It's their little clubhouse, as it were, their little clubhouse, where they could go and talk privately Idios, my private little thing, whatever it is. The Bible says, wives, each wife, arrange yourself under your idios husband. Idios. What does idios mean? It means your own, your exclusive possession. Your husband, not somebody else's husband, your husband. Idios. So we used to say, so people would remember this word. The Bible says, wives, submit yourself to your idiot husbands. That's what it says in Greek. It doesn't know what it means. It means your own, exclusive to you, special, by yourself. Idios. And the Hebrews of Jesus Christ's sojourn on earth called the lowest, the trial level court in their hierarchy of courts, the bench of idiots. Why did they call them that? Because they privately, without having to make explanation to anybody, in their little jury room, a place off by themselves, idios, see, your own, privately, exclusively, to yourself alone, make the decision. So it's called the bench of idios. They owe no one any explanation. And again, many of you have heard me say that about the jury. The jury is arbiter, not just decider in the case, they are arbiter. What does that mean? We get our word arbitrary from that. The jury can do anything they want to do, and they don't have to tell anybody why they did it. They don't have to make it logical if they don't want. They can if they want, but they are arbiters, arbitrary. They can do whatever they want, just as God. The Bible says our God, sovereign of all the universe, sets, listen to this, sets in the heavens and does whatsoever pleases who? You? No. He does whatsoever pleases him. Period. End of sentence, end of paragraph. That's what the jury does, don't they? They do. They're in a jury room. They don't. Nobody can see what they're doing, and they do whatsoever pleases them. And they come out, and we say, "How could you have come to that conclusion? How, jury, could you have acquitted OJ of axing his wife? How, jury, could you have given this silly woman who drove through McDonald's, got a cup of coffee, put it between her legs like a dodo, and burnt her thighs? How could you give her $1 million?" Well, it's because the jury at common law sets in their idios place, and they do whatsoever pleases them. That's why. Oh, it's upsetting, isn't it? But you know what else? Would you want it some other way? If you want things to be logical, you can go live in South America. They take pride in the logic of their law and the logic of their judicial decisions. They take undue pride, even though their countries are falling apart. They're stuck in poverty and squalor. There is no wealth and prosperity in the communist countries. In the European country, no, not like here, for crying out loud, not like here. But they see our productivity. Oh, it's always been this way. And they look at us with their law of the city and look at our law of the land, and they say, yeah, you guys got it nice, but we're scholarly. And we take satisfaction, compensatory satisfaction. We don't have what you have, but we compensate to our own minds because we're logical. Get out of here. I was reading recently, or no, it was something on the internet I saw about and I'd known German POWs that had come to the United States. Most all of them are gone now, but I'd met some over the years. They got the first ones that came out of North Africa. They brought them to Europe, and they were starving. They brought them to Britain, get them prepared to ship to the U.S. They were starving. I asked this one fellow I knew out in California. He became an American citizen. I said, well, didn't that make you mad? He said, no, not at all. It didn't make us mad because we saw that the British soldiers that were guarding us were starving too. They were thin as scarecrows, just like us. They didn't have anything to eat. They were rationing people to 1 egg a day in Britain during the war. Did we have that problem? We were moving about 3,000 prisoners. I think it was 3,000 German prisoners a week to the United States on ships. And although they were kept in places where they couldn't do damage, we were serving them coffee every morning, ham and eggs, and get this, ice cream, candy bars, and bottles of Coca-Cola. It was culture shock to them. They'd never had that in their entire lives, much less as men in the Army, they were blamed near starving. And we were not only fat and happy over here in America, in our big fat country, while we were fighting a war on not one, 2 fronts around the world. And they've been told that America's starving. They're fighting war on 2 fronts. We tried it. It didn't work. You know, they went to Russia and they were trying to build Fortress Europe. It doesn't work. And the Americans, we'll defeat them. They can't do this. And they got over here as prisoners of war and never been fed better in their entire lives. That's what our common law tradition has done for us. Yes. Yes. We're not the country that has been blessed with the most natural resources in the world. We've been blessed with a lot, but there are other countries that have been blessed with more, and they're starving. No, I just think about it now as I get older. I'm going out and gathering eggs, and I eat fresh eggs. I eat them raw if I'm taking ocean. I eat them fried. We scramble them up with hamburger, a little milk in there. Chop up some green peppers, fresh tomatoes and taters. Taters go good with scrambled eggs too, taters and hamburger and whatever. And I'm not starving. That's a big deal. Why is that? Because we got land. And our common law of the tradition, our law of the land, gives us a tradition of how to use land. Our system and understanding of agriculture is from our common law tradition. The law of the land that came from England. And the agricultural system there. Now, if you like to study that kind of stuff, it's being lost, you can get the book, Excellence of the Common Law. I have whole sections on our common law agricultural tradition and why we aren't starving, why we eat so much, and the principles of it that we don't think about. We just live in it and do them. And because we're not comparing and contrasting our circumstances with the rest of the world, we tend to forget. Well, to tradition, of course, in Jesus Christ's day, the bench of idiots. And then there were 1, 2, 3 appellate courts after that, and then the Supreme Court of last resort of 71 members. The Supreme Court of last resort of 71 members called the Sanhedrin. And in my book, Excellence of the Common Law, you can get that at commonlawyer.com. I have whole sections on the Israelite court system. And that's why I'm big on the idea that the closer we can bring the courts to home, like they did then, like used to be in England, as Blackstone said of Anglo-Saxon England, justice was available at the door of every cottage. Because every little hundred We call them today townships. Every 100 had a court. Today our courts are county courts, but we should have 100 courts. Why? Because the people that are close to you, you put them on the jury, they know you. In a county, people often know you, that's true too. But even more so at the lower level, and that's the way God has established it in the Old Testament. Remember Moses, his father-in-law Jethro, priest of Midian, who was not an Israelite, by the way, he was a Midianite, a worshiper of the true God. Well, why are not all the courts equal in our state courts? Or why are not all the courts equal in our federal courts? Now, you remember we have the appellate courts at the top of the Supreme Court of the United States, and that system of courts. Then over here in the state courts, the state Supreme Court is the court, final court of last resort. And in the Bible, in the nation Israel, the way God established it, the 71 gray-bearded men, gray-bearded, called the Sanhedrin, the elders. Elder means, it's a translation of a Hebrew word that means gray-bearded men. Again, the Bible's accurate. Because as men get older, their hair thins, some a lot, some more than others, but it always thins out quite a bit, and that's why God doesn't say gray-headed, he says gray-bearded. Why are they not all equal, all these courts? Answer. Some are set over others in order that if one makes any mistake, it may be corrected by that court above it. When a citizen thinks that he has been wronged in a lower court, he may take his cause to a higher court. This is called an appeal. An appeal. The word appeal is Anglo-French. It's Norman French is a better way to say it, and it, of course, crept into our legal tradition because of the Norman invasion of 1066. The Norman invasion were of Norwegians who had conquered about a third to a half of France and then invaded England, but during the 165 years they lived there in Normandy, they called it Normandy because they were Norwegians. They picked up the French tongue. They brought it to England. And for about 200 years, only French was spoken in the courts of England and in government and in parliament. They even renamed the Wittenagemot, they called it by a French word, parlement, which means a place where we parley, where we discuss. Well, that's why we have the word appeal. Appeal is a French word, but it means to ask another court to review the court below and the decision. But remember, the jury, the verdict of the jury is not reviewable. According to our Constitution of the United States, in the federal system of courts, remember our Constitution of the United States applies to things in the general government in Washington, D.C. And Amendment 7 of our Constitution says that whatever the jury decides is not to be reviewed. That's it. It doesn't have to be explained. It doesn't have to be logical. That's none of our business. The jury is final. Unless, and then it says unless. The jury was not chosen, impaneled, and proceed according to the process of our common law. The process, not the conclusions, the process. In other words, how do you choose the jury? How do you impanel the jury? How soon after the jury is impaneled does the trial have to start? And the answer is within a minute or two. And then is the jury properly sequestered so that it only considers evidence that the parties present at trial? Or can it be proven that the jury looked at other evidence? I had that happen in a case once, and the whole jury verdict was thrown out and we had to start over. Why? Because somebody on the jury snuck some legal books into the jury room. We don't want the jury to be looking at legal books, for crying out loud. We got lawyers to do that, but no, we want them, the jury, to bring their guts, their instincts into the jury room and not be machines. And if they don't want to be logical, that's okay with us. Oh, I know I beat that one a lot. And I hope I don't beat it till it becomes a dead horse and just keep beating a dead horse. That's silly, isn't it? If you've got it, I hope you do. But the problem with this is, and me doing, there are constantly new listeners coming in, and they haven't heard me. Some of you have heard me say all these things over and over and over. And I try to think of new ways to say them, but there are just a few fundamental truths in life, really, just a few. We just keep applying them in different ways to different facts and to different people as people die and new ones come along. That's what happens. Well, let's look at this. Why are not all these courts equal? Answer, because some are set over others, in order that if one makes any mistake, it may be corrected by the court above it. A mistake, almost always a procedure, not a fact. No, sir. The appellate courts are loath to interfere with the lower courts, except if the lower court is not following the proper process. Well, did you give this guy an opportunity to be heard? Did this guy get notice of the hearing that was coming up? No. Well, then we're going to have to start over again. See, that's what appellate courts are supposed to be doing primarily and do. This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up the racket all night long.